Good evening, everyone. We'll get started here just in a minute. We've just still got some people joining into the meeting, so hold tight. We'll get started here soon. All right, folks, we'll get started here in just a minute. Just give people a couple more minutes to trickle on in. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us this evening. I think I'll go ahead and get us started. It looks like we've got a decent number of attendees that have joined on. So thank you so much for joining us. We're glad that you decided to spend part of your evening with us. And for that, we really do intend to make the next hour a valuable time for everybody. First off, my name is Amelia Martin, and I'm a senior engineer with Kittleson in our Reston office, and I will be moderating tonight's webinar and Q&A. Joceline, if you could move to the next slide. Our speakers today are Brandon Nevers, who has been with Kittelson for more than 25 years and has been our CEO since January of 2020. Veronica McBeth, an associate planner who joined Kittelson in 2018 after her successful career in the public sector, and Joceline Suhaimi, a transportation analyst who joined Kittelson last year straight out of school at UCLA. Brandon, Veronica, and Joceline will each tell you a bit more about their journeys to Kittelson a bit later on. And I will say you guys are in for a treat. Since I know all three of the people speaking tonight, you really, I think, will enjoy hearing from them. But before we get to that, I'll go through a few logistics first. This is the first of 4 virtual events we're offering in our Conversations with Kittelson series. And this series is meant to be exactly that, an open conversation with transportation professionals who were in your shoes maybe a year ago or maybe 20 years ago, but who either way can look back on their experiences, share with you what they've learned, and most importantly, see what questions you have as you evaluate your career options. You are invited to join us for any and all of these future events you see here on the screen. Next week, we'll be talking all about our internship program, how it's structured, and what opportunities we're offering for summer of 2022. The following week, we are bringing together a panel of experts to talk through innovative project examples and what it's like to work on these projects. And finally, we'll be wrapping up the series with our Day in the Life panel, where each panelist is less than a few years into their career and can share how they got to Kittelson, what their day-to-day is like, and what they wish they had known when starting their careers. But today, we're going to start off with an overview of career paths in transportation, what to think about as you evaluate prospective employers and career paths, and a bit about the values and culture that make us at Kittleson who we are. Importantly, we believe that asking questions about an organization's culture and values is such an important part of evaluating a potential workplace. The presentation will be fairly short because we do want to make time for your questions more than anything else. And we've already gotten some great ones through the RSVP form, and we're excited to dive into some of those. I also want to encourage you to use the chat box in your GoToWebinar panel to post questions throughout the presentation, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. Some of the questions we've already gotten before, I think we should be able to answer with the presentations from the presenters. And I would also note any questions about hiring opportunities, internships, those kinds of things, please do go to our careers page at kittelson.com. And if you're specifically interested in that, in the internship and what opportunities there may be, I would highly encourage you to attend that next webinar, as we're going to be focused on career discussions and questions tonight. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Veronica to kick us off.
Thank you, Amelia. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for spending your afternoon for some of you and evening for others with us to talk about career opportunities in transportation. So as we all know, transportation profession offers many varied career paths from engineering and planning to finance and marketing, and each of these tracks is critical to the operation of public and private transportation organizations. One notable thing is that you can get to these paths in many non-traditional ways. Next slide. So we're going to start off just talking a little bit about career opportunities in the public sector. Transportation is considered part of the public works that are supported by government agencies, particularly in the case of highways, streetlights, bicycle and pedestrian functions, road and bridges. In most cases, states and counties and cities own and operate the roadway network and are responsible for planning for these streets and highways that serve their communities and programming funding to carry out that plan, and then assuring it is designed and built and absolutely maintained according to accepted standards. In some agencies, the work is done in-house by their own staff, but as we see today, more and more agencies are now using contractors to do the planning, design, and construction, and in some cases, they even maintain an operation of their planning projects. And they still provide oversight of the process, but actually the hands-on work is done by the private sector. And in that case, that could be us, the consultants. Another function that transportation professionals and government perform is assuring that the laws and policies passed by their legislatures, councils, and boards are implemented. So in some cases, these may be engineering or safety standards. They could also include literally hundreds of laws directed at protecting the environment, occupational safety, social justice, labor standards, and a whole host of other areas. One of the reasons this is so important to transportation is that most transportation improvements use public funds, and as a result are subjected to those laws and rules. I started my career off in the public sector. I spent time on Capitol Hill, so I was a person that actually started off helping write the laws and policies that govern the type of work that we do. And then I transitioned to state government, where again, I stayed in my lane as doing policy and legislative work. And then I continued and worked my way down to city government, where I made a transition and still did some policy and legislative work, but transitioned to doing more operational and hands-on planning work, which is kind of where I enjoyed being more the boots on the ground and kind of seeing the fruits of my labor. And so there are plenty of ways that you can mix and mingle with doing public sector work and private sector work. Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. Private sector work. So in the private sector, the work tends to be more dynamic because those working as consultants are called upon to address so many various transportation issues and problems. These include latest research being done through the Transportation Research Board, NACTO, FHWA, to major interstate traffic studies and designs, consultants that help state and local governments develop the plans that they need to improve mobility, safety, transit, bike and ped access, and then help them develop the projects that will actually carry out those plans. Consultants also help to do work that is used to develop national transportation policies or to implement new rules and laws. The private sector is also providing a lot of training to the transportation community through universities and other outlets. And consultants additionally do a lot of work with other private sector entities, such as as sub-consultants, and helping develop new commercial and manufacturing centers and fostering economic growth. Interestingly enough, one of our big clients here at Kittleson is Costco. We also work with Nike, Disney World, and so we have very large commercial clients that you wouldn't necessarily expect would need the use of a transportation firm to do the type of work they do. Next slide. So my career journey, as I previously mentioned, I made a very non-traditional path to Kittleson. I started off on Capitol Hill and I spent about 10 years, about a decade, working in public policy and made my way through Capitol Hill to the Maryland state government, where I worked for the state and writing legislation that helped both state transportation issues to adapt to federal legislation as it related to infrastructure bills. Also encouraging the state to adopt and increase the minority business percentages that would have to be included and utilized by local legislation, or excuse me, local governments. And then one of my favorite things that I did was work with Baltimore City as a deputy director, where I managed their active transportation. That included managing a circulator bus system. I managed their bike infrastructure, bike lanes, pedestrian functions, and their community engagement efforts. And each thing that I got to do, I did it as it related to getting closer and closer to the people where I live, work, and play. And the cool part is in my transition to Kittleson, although I am not a public servant, I am still a public servant because I get to still do really awesome work where I live. And also the type of work that we do in other cities, a lot of the people in our various offices do a lot of work for the places where they get to live, work, and play as well. So even though we are a consulting firm and we do work for the federal government, commercial entities, we do a lot of local work. And so we take a lot of pride in the local work we do because we live in those areas. Next slide. So we're gonna pass on to finding alignment with an organization.
All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Joceline Suhaimi. I am a transportation analyst in the Southern California office, but currently talking to all of you from my parents' house in the Bay Area. So I'm going to talk a little bit about finding alignment with an organization. So you have a lot of choices, and needless to say, there are opportunities to have rewarding positions in both the public and the private sectors, as Veronica talked about. However, regardless of your choice, as you're considering your future, it's important to think about your work as more than a job, but instead think about how it'll affect the rest of your life. So things to consider as you kind of go through your job search is who will I learn from? What kind of mentorship opportunities are provided? What kind of culture do I want to be a part of? How will I grow in my career at an organization? Where do I want my career to lead? And what benefits are the most important to me? So as you go through your job search, I would like all of you to think about a few different things. So the first thing is to get curious. So I'm going to get into a little bit of how I ended up in transportation, which was kind of an accident. I made a couple of friends who were officers of the Institute of Transportation Engineers at UCLA at the end of my freshman year, and I just sort of got sucked in from there. So if you think you're interested in transportation and you're still in school, get curious. Approach your professors, seek clubs such as ITE, WTS, ASCE, or APA, and attend networking events. Conferences, networking nights, and seminars are great ways to get involved in your local transportation community. And you're already taking a step in the right direction by attending this webinar. So the second thing is to get uncomfortable. So my first internship was actually in the construction industry after my freshman year, and it was a really unique experience that boosted my career and got me used to getting uncomfortable. When I started, I had no idea what working in construction management would entail, but I definitely learned a lot and sharpened my communication skills and my familiarity with how projects were built. My introduction to Kittleson was via a woman who attended one of the networking events that we put on through ITE at UCLA. She encouraged me to apply, and I did, but I actually ended up working for a different consulting firm. Through the interview process, I did get to know a lot of people at Kittleson and knew that this is where I wanted to work. So I reached out again during my junior year. So the summer after my junior year, I was placed in the Tampa office. So I was working in an unfamiliar city with new people doing a new job. And it took a lot of work to adapt to a new work environment. Kittleson does a great job at really involving their interns in the technical aspects of our work. So I worked on a variety of planning, safety, and conceptual design projects. And I also spent time at our week-long intern jamboree in the Portland office, getting to know more folks in the firm, getting to know my fellow interns, and getting exposed to the Kittleson culture. And the last thing is to get ready. So after my internship, I took some time to reflect on full-time positions, and I actually interviewed with several other firms before finally reaching out to Kittleson and deciding, yeah, I think this is where I want to be. So based on office culture, location, and need, I took a position at Kittleson here in Southern California. And I've been here for a little over a year now, and I finally feel like I'm hitting my groove. Even though I had the internship experience and I've been here for about a year, there's still a lot for me to learn. Since starting at Kittleson, I've gotten involved in planning, design, research, and operations projects. And I also facilitate the LGBTQ employee resource group, and I assist with university outreach, putting on this webinar and the webinars after this. Kittleson has also been really supportive of my involvement with ITE and my continuous professional development. So for those of you approaching graduation and applying to job opportunities, this slide is simply for you as you kind of consider compensation. You may already be receiving and considering offers. This just illustrates that there's much more to total compensation than your base salary. I do want to emphasize that at the entry level, you'll find a fairly small difference in starting annual salary. So this probably isn't the biggest factor in your decision process. As your years of experience increases, there will be a much bigger difference between your minimum and maximum salaries, but the experience and opportunities you gain early on in your career will play a big part of your compensation later in your career. So make sure you're looking into your money-based benefits like bonuses and profit sharing, professional support, health insurance, and also time-based benefits like paid time off. So now I'm going to hand it over to Brandon Nevers, our CEO, to talk a little bit about Kittleson's culture and values.
All right. Thank you, Joss, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Again, I'm Brandon Nevers. I'm based out of our Reston office along with Amelia. I'm talking to you today from my home office outside in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. I currently serve as President CEO. But my journey began very much like your all's did, which was learning about Kittleson while I was an undergraduate. I was at University of Idaho at the time. It was just a few years ago, back in 1996. So it's been over 25 years that I've been with Kittleson, and it's been quite a journey. Began just starting off as entry-level transportation engineer, analyst, and was able over the course of my career and really fortunate to be able to do a lot of different things and take on different roles in different parts of the country, from Portland, Oregon to Baltimore to Reston, and also playing a role at a firm-wide level. So here I'd like to start by just sharing a little bit about the values that make us who we are as an organization. We share this because every organization has a unique set of culture and values, and we want to start to equip you with questions to ask as you make your assessment of other organizations in your job search. So as you see here on the slide, Kittleson has over 250 staff, actually getting closer to 300 now, and we bring perspectives from all over the world. Staff at Kittleson have backgrounds in traditional transportation fields such as engineering, that's my particular path, and planning, as well as disciplines including public health, mathematics, graphic design, so a wide range. As transportation professionals, we value diversity, and this includes race, gender, background, and many more attributes that make our staff unique. And it's these differences that allow us to approach our projects and relationships from different lenses and serve our communities as best as possible. All right. So our staff are spread out. We're a national firm. We have over 24 offices in 14 states. So our oldest and largest office is in Portland, Oregon, which was founded in 1985 when the firm began. And our newest office, just from earlier this year, is in San Diego. Our operating philosophy is pretty simple: one firm, many locations. So this means that we don't form project teams based on geography, and offices don't compete against one another for profit. We form project teams based on staff interests and skill sets, and it's very common for projects to consist of staff all over the country. We've been doing this for a long time now, and it's one of the reasons we were pretty well set up when we had to take our operation remote last year when the pandemic hit. Our growth philosophy has always been to follow our people. We hire passionate, motivated professionals and give them flexibility and encouragement to pursue their interests. This naturally has led us over time into new markets and new practice areas, and it's our model as we look to the future. Core values. Simply put, values are meaningful beliefs and philosophies. Every individual and organization has them, and the more evidence you find of the values, the more likely they truly guide the thinking and action of the organization. So while generally broad and encompassing, values get implemented in the smallest details of people's lives. Therefore, it's far better to assess the values of an individual or organization based on actions, not just words. An organization's values often tell a story about why the organization came to be. So one of your objectives in a job search should be to identify the values of the organization you're talking with, assess how well they fit with your individual beliefs and philosophies. So let me give you some examples of questions that you can ask to help understand this. Very simple one: why was the company established, or the organization, or even the department you're talking with? Give an example of an important and difficult decision your organization recently made. What were the trade-offs involved, and what led you to that decision? Or for what purpose does your organization choose to add staff, reduce staff, increase the breadth or depth of a service area, or perhaps pivot away from it? So with all that as backdrop, what you see on this slide are Kittleson's primary core values. We describe our values in terms of an approach of outward focus and a trust-based work environment. Outward focus refers to focusing our energy on the needs and interests of those around us. So that includes our clients, each other, our staff, our families, and our profession. And this requires trust with those we work and interact with and depend upon, and knowing that others are looking out for our or my best interests as I am for them. So it's a powerful model. All right, and I'll jump to the last slide here. You heard Joss talk about employee resource groups and the one she's leading, LGBTQ. We began this just about a year ago, and it's important to us that Kittleson is a place where staff can bring their whole selves to work and experience a sense of belonging and inclusion. We've sought to take an approach of listening And one of our focus areas from this year, from our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, is conducting a staff experiences assessment, where the committee is using a combination of channels like listening sessions, small group discussions, and anonymous surveys to better understand the Kittleson experience from all perspectives so that we can learn where we can do better and grow together. One addition we made, as I mentioned earlier, is adding employee resource groups. These are opt-in communities where staff can connect with others who share a significant aspect of that experience. What you see on the screen here is our initial list of ERGs, and we intend to expand this over time as new groups are requested. Amelia?
Great, thank you for that. Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of this evening. So again, thanks to our speakers for talking a little bit and kind of covering some ground initially. I'm seeing that we've had a couple of questions come in as people were talking. And there are a couple that we had gotten before that I think maybe we'll start with that before going to some of these live questions. Just as a reminder, maybe for people who joined on a little bit late, we will be focused on questions that are more related to career, anything about job opportunities, or the internship program. I would encourage you to check out the careers page at Kittleson.com or attend the upcoming webinar about our internship program. So with that, let's go ahead and go to a question that we received earlier before the webinar, which was, what are the major differences from early in your career to now, and what do you miss the most? I think for this one, maybe we'll start with Veronica, then go to Brandon, and then maybe close out with Joceline.
I don't know if I miss anything early in my career. I would say, I guess, so I'm a structure person. I guess that's what I will say. Coming here has been a big change for me. We have a flat structure here, and it was a big difference for me. I remember the first time I wanted to go to a conference, and so I asked someone in our office, and my office is based in Baltimore, and I said, hey, and the guy, and his name is Ed, I said, Ed, can I go to this conference? And he said, well, do you think it's a good conference to go to? And I said, well, yeah, they asked me to present. And he's like, well, okay, I think you should go. And I said, okay, well, will you sign the paperwork for it? And he said, no, you do it yourself. I just didn't understand. And so that was a pretty substantial change for me. And my point for that is the level of trust and autonomy that you will experience here is probably second to none. And I say that in the sense that you are taught this owner mentality. And I say that when I started working here and now I'm almost 4 years in, I don't do anything cavalier. I would have never done anything that way before, but even more so, I try to do things as if this was my very own operation and company. And I think that's one of the things that everybody who works here gets, that quality. It's impossible not to get it. Like, everyone learns that, and it's this amazing quality you develop as an employee here at Kittleson.
All right, yeah, I'll jump in. I think the major difference, and it's just the life cycle of a career. At the beginning, I was very dependent on others for just for work and direction. I began following my undergraduate degree and really had I had a couple classes in transportation, but no practical experience. So everything I was working on was new. Whereas now I'm in a position where my role is to help provide that guidance. I think early on, my focus would be in fewer things and I would spend more time with it. And now I touch a lot of issues at a very high level. So what do I miss? I miss sometimes augering down. I kind of am a detailed person. I like doing analysis, and I spent a lot of my early part of my career doing that. And it's also where I was able to build skills and gain a lot of knowledge. I feel like I'm still developing skills, still developing knowledge in what I do, but very much expanded beyond just that technical focus. So there are times I do really miss that project work and digging in. But like I said, I've enjoyed the journey as well, and just being able to expand and do different things over time. I've never felt bored, always felt challenged, and that's something I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great question, and I am pretty early in my career, so I think for me, I don't really know what I would miss necessarily, but I think for me, my kind of big shift was from being a student to being a working professional. I think one kind of interesting thing is that I think in school, a lot of times you're sort of expected to work on things on your own, right? Like it's your own paper, it's your own test. There's some group projects, but at Kittleson, everything is a group project. But also, like, everything then becomes a shared responsibility. So, one of the kind of nice things about a paper or a test is that if I don't do well, it doesn't really affect anyone but me, right? But with Kittleson, if I'm not consistently delivering high quality work, it affects the project schedule, it affects the client's budget. And these are all considerations that we take when we're, putting together project teams and things like that. And obviously, like, there's plenty of support, and I'm never like the only person working on something. There are always people that I can contact if I get stuck, or if I have to take a sick day or something like that. But that's definitely been a huge shift. It's just, I think, the level of responsibility. One thing that really surprised me about Kittleson is the flat structure, for sure. I mean, for me, in my 1 year of experience, I have been also asked to go to conferences, and I am also the one that's sort of in charge of my own career. So when I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to present at this conference, I also have to fill out my own paperwork an entire year into my career. So sometimes I know, like, sometimes I sit here and I'm just like, sometimes I'm just like, can someone please just tell me what to do? But at the same time, I know that if someone told me what to do all the time, I wouldn't like my job as much. So, it's a bit of a catch-22 maybe.
Great. Thanks, Joceline, Veronica, and Brandon. I really appreciated your answers there. Joceline, I feel you on the trade-off between, being in your own driver's seat for your career, but it also means you're in the driver's seat for your own career. So it can be a lot to think about. With that in mind, understanding that you have this kind of responsibility and figuring out where you want your career to go, and your own wellness and happiness. We've gotten a couple of questions in the live question feed, as well as some beforehand asking about sort of that work and life balance. So how have you found, or have you found, a work-life balance in this industry? Let's go ahead and do Veronica, Joceline, and then Brandon.
Yes, I'd say 1,000,000% yes. This is probably the first place I've ever actually found a work-life balance. And I almost felt guilty, I guess, because I had never had it before and I was so used to not having it. My last job before this, I hadn't taken a vacation in 10 years. I would take like a weekend trip or something. And when I took that job, before I accepted it, I had planned a vacation before accepting the job intentionally because I had not taken a vacation in 10 years. And I don't ever recommend that. So I can't see your faces and I'm sure you're gasping, but I do not recommend that. Do not do what I did. Trust me. That being said, coming here, self-care is so important here. I mean, I did take a vacation a couple years in here. I mean, I took vacations before then, but I took a long vacation and I was sneaking and checking my email while I was on vacation. And one of my colleagues, and I'll say that they'll know who, Bailey, caught me checking my email, and it was a whole day ahead because I was in Australia. And she sent me an email. She's like, "You stop this right now. You're on PTO." And I was like, "Excuse me." I could hear her saying it, but it was an email. And I was like, "Oh, I just don't want to be behind when I get back." She's like, "You're on PTO. You stop checking your email." But so self-care is so important. And, this firm did a heck of a job to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And I think when Joss mentioned like things like ERGs and everything like that, you have these safe spaces to go and talk to people about, things that are going on at work, outside of work. I mean, it's really important. And I think we get a lot of good things in the space of self-care.
Yeah, I can kind of going off of that. Yeah, I think within the firm there are a lot of spaces where we kind of get to do things outside of our regular project work. So, I'm pretty early in my career. A large majority of the things that I do are going to be project work, right? Because I think what we want for an entry-level employee is for you to be able to pick up as many technical skills as possible, right? And really get that technical background in like being able to do transportation analysis, right? I think consulting in general has a bit of a bad reputation in terms of work-life balance. I think there are lots of firms out there in kind of all over the industry, not just in the transportation industry, but in like civil engineering, engineering in general, and even in other industries where, consulting, it feels like, you're always trying to hit a billable target. It's always about profit and things like that. But I haven't really found that here. I know definitely so I was class of 2020, so I'm a pandemic graduate. And I started like in the thick of the pandemic, like in the summer of 2020. And I think one thing that I had started doing really early on was just working a lot because there was nothing else to do during the pandemic. And that honestly was not the best approach for me. I definitely hit a wall pretty early where I realized okay, I need to step back and actually turn off my computer at the end of the day and actually go outside and, do things other than sit at my desk and work. But yeah, since then, I've also taken vacations, I take my holidays, I take my lunch and all of that stuff. And even though the expectation as an analyst is to spend quite a bit of time on project work, I found that, Kittleson is pretty supportive of me, facilitating the LGBTQ, ERG, being involved in university outreach and all of these other activities that I think are really important to me. Working with the employee resource groups and doing university outreach are things that are really important to me in addition to my project work. And people have been really supportive of that. And yeah, I honestly rarely work over 40 hours. And if I do work over 40 hours, it's just because it's crunch time, there's a deadline, and then I'll put in a couple extra hours just to polish a report. It's never anything I'm not chained at my desk for 50 or 60 hours a week. So I don't know. I think we've done a pretty good job at fostering that culture of flexibility too. The work environment itself is pretty flexible. So, I've worked with people who take every other Friday off and just make it up during the week, or people working flexible schedules, especially during the pandemic when school shut down and everyone's kids are home. So, a lot of times if you're a working parent, you sometimes just have to, do family things right during the day. So I think that flexibility has always been a part of Kittleson's culture. And I think during these pandemic times, it's just become even more important.
That's all really great input. I'll just kind of quickly highlight, I think, some themes that have been important for me over the years. Because it can be difficult. I think the first one for me is just to really define what's important and to be thinking ahead. As you get into your career, especially if you enjoy it, which hopefully you all will, and if you have some success, which I expect you will as well, it's easy to get sucked in. I mean, there's a lot out there. If you're, and if you just kind of let yourself go, you can easily find yourself in a position where you've maybe neglected other parts of your life. So I think it's important to kind of define what's important inside of work and outside of work, and vice versa for inside of work, to really think about the kind of experiences you want to get. And sometimes that requires extra time and effort too. But I think thinking ahead and being proactive, communication, for me, that was really important early on. And if things break down, chances are my communication at some level is broken down with the people around me, with the people I'm working with, for the people who I, maybe are asking me to do things. All of these things, just communication and clarity goes a long way to helping, I think, to minimize some bumps in the road. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's probably good for now. It's, I think, something everybody is going to have to learn themselves. Their approach is unique and how they spend time. Oh, last thing I'll say is kind of take advantage of the situation. I think with our flexibility, yeah, there are times and stretches where maybe I do work, or I work at odd hours, or I'm traveling, pre-pandemic at least, traveling. But I felt like over time I've been able to kind of take advantage of the flexibility for personal time as well, and still meet my objectives and do what's needed at work, but kind of help keep everything whole. So anyway, hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I know for me personally, a lot of that really resonated. And Joceline, I feel you on the, maybe I should go outside and look at a tree or a plant, something that's alive. Maybe that's a good idea. So that's all great. Another question I wanted to get to, and this is one that I find myself having time and again with potential applicants or people who are interested in a career in transportation, is why did you choose to go into transportation planning? What really interests you about it? I know it seems like such a baseline question that maybe not a lot of people ask, but I really find that a lot of our work, a lot of sort of this self-starting personality that we're looking for at Kittleson really comes back down to this question. So for that, I think we'll start with Joceline, and then we'll go to Brandon, and then close off with Veronica.
Cool. Yeah. I wanted to say, like, yes, looking at trees is good. My mom actually scolded me. She's like, you need to look at something green every once in a while. And I told her, well, Mom, Microsoft Excel is green. And she got really upset at me. Anyways, yeah. So I think, to be honest, like I said, I found transportation kind of by accident. When I was applying to college, I was like, maybe I should be an engineer. And my parents were like, are you sure you want to be an engineer? I don't know. They were worried. They were worried I talked too much to be an engineer. We could get into that. But yeah, so I ended up in the civil engineering program at UCLA, and I was like, maybe I'll do structural engineering. I did like one structural engineering class, and I was like, I'm not gonna do structural engineering. But I met a group of people that were part of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and I just sort of got sucked in from there. I found that I was really interested in thinking about systems, thinking about the way that people move around. And I think a lot of what we do is like trying to figure out why people make the decisions that they do in terms of travel, which is a really interesting question. And I mean, transportation is a basic human need, right? Everything we have, everything that we need to survive as humans, everything that we need to thrive as humans, food, water, groceries, social activities, medical care is only possible if we can get to it or if it can get to us. And I found that really, really resonated with me, and I wanted to be a part of a community that really cared about people, right? So I think, I got my degree in engineering. I learned a lot about like how signal operations work and, how to do a capacity analysis. And then I actually did an urban planning minor through UCLA's transportation policy program. And then I think like that just sort of acquainted me with the more human elements of transportation, right? Like how the decisions we make and how the way we design things affects people's lives. And these are all problems that I'm just super interested in solving and that I found myself really enjoying thinking about. And it's just kind of led me down a path from there. And I couldn't really imagine working in anything else. I think transportation is really just where I found my niche. And then I really enjoyed working at Kittleson and like getting to know people at Kittleson because I just loved being around people who were super nerdy about transportation too, And I find that, for some people, transportation is just a job that they do, and it's like interesting enough to them. But for me, it's something that I just really love thinking about and just really love being around.
Good. I can relate to a lot of that. For me, I came in through a civil engineering background, and I was drawn in by a professor. So Dr. Mike Kite at University of Idaho just really had a different approach to how he taught his classes. And I think a lot of people kind of resonate with that. Sometimes your favorite classes are the ones where you have the best connection with your professor, or the professors you like the most happen to be the classes you enjoy the most. So I think that was a lot of it for me. So very fortunate from that regard. To get that kind of window into transportation. I was able to audit a graduate level course as an undergrad, and Dr. Kite was showing examples of CoreSim, which is a micro simulation model, which in the mid 90s, I hadn't seen anything like that before. I thought that was pretty cool. So I liked that kind of technology, futuristic side and modeling approaches to transportation. I grew up outside of Seattle, and again, things have changed, have grown a lot, but even back then, a lot of people complained about traffic. So I sort of figured this is a problem. It's probably good job security. There's work in that field. So figured there was a path there. And then I think kind of the last element, because I did enjoy my curriculum, I like the problem solving aspect, but to me, what was different from transportation versus others is just the people element. And I thought it was more interesting. I knew the work involved working with people and community and talking about things you could see, which in, electrical engineering or others, I just always didn't quite have that connection with. I felt, transportation, I think everybody can identify with. And there's also this human behavioral element that makes it unique, that really influences our work. It takes it maybe away from very accurate, predictive, precise science to a bit of an art form, but I've enjoyed that a lot. It's been interesting for me.
So for me, I didn't start out in the technical end. I started out on the policy end of things. So I couldn't probably be more different than Brandon and Joss in this manner. So I always had an itch for politics, and so always wanting to kind of help make the policies, make the laws on how things operated and worked. But separately, always loved transportation, always had an itch to use public transportation, and so it was just always a part of my life. Always bicycling, always in college using some form of public transportation and personal travel, always trying to figure out how many modes I could use. So it was just always a part of my life in a very bizarre way. Never in a million years had you told me that I would transition from politics into actively becoming a transportation planner. I would have said, no way, that's a joke. But I got tired of being so far away from the actual work. So working at such a superficial level in policy work, it got to be daunting in the sense that, yes, bills pass, policy passes, but you're so far away from the actual things that it's impacting. I didn't feel, I guess, the gratification from helping fund something. Like I wanted to actually see where the money was going. I wanted to spend the money that was being funded to actually do the work. I wanted to see the marks. I wanted to see the striping. I wanted to see the flex posts. I wanted to see the bikes that were getting bought for bike share. I wanted to see the buses getting bought. I wanted to tour the buses. I wanted to select the buses. I wanted to do all of those things. So that was where the turn and transition came for me, from policy to actual practical application of planning. And so that was the draw for me. And that was the transition period for me. And I couldn't imagine ever going what I would call backwards. And even though everybody else tells me I went backwards by going from federal to state to local to consulting, I think I did it the absolute right way. So that's kind of my sin.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I would agree that there are many paths to get to here, and there is no right one, no normal one, no wrong one. So yeah, I really appreciate everybody's thoughts on that. All right. Time is already flying by, but we've still got some more questions. One that I wanted to get to is, I think, important because it kind of ties into our culture of research and applied research. So Brandon, I think this one is mostly for you. Do you encourage your employees to do some research related work and publish research papers? I know we've been talking about this internally, as a company more and more. So I think it's a really great question. So Brandon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, well, from the beginning, it's really emanated from staff interests. Our founder, Wayne Kittelson, had been involved in the Transportation Research Board and a committee of that, and kind of through that engagement built relationships and connections, and that led to working with others in a sub-consultant role on research projects, and then ultimately being in a place where we are now, where we lead many projects. But it began from just a very simple interest and a commitment and dedication. And so that is something we encourage of everyone in the path of follow your interests. So many of our staff coming out of school, particularly if they have a master's or PhD degree, enjoy that, want to continue it. So we do look for ways and encourage people to continue to contribute, to give back, writing papers. Research is also a practice area for us. We do quite a bit of work, so there's real activity in terms of identifying pursuits and preparing proposals and then delivering on the projects. And so we grow based around the interests of staff, and over the last several years, we've added more and more staff who really do want to focus their career in that area, and we think there's opportunity to do that here. I think more than anything, we want to create this in that one firm environment as something everybody has the opportunity to participate in. I think it's a great idea if everybody at least works on one project, one research related project at some point in their career, and at least understand and get some exposure to it. Some things are, I think people may find from a project standpoint, some things are more similar. It's not always so unique, but there are some differences. And I think you learn a lot. So, but beyond that, it's really for those who want to pursue it.
Great, thank you, Brandon. Joceline, Veronica, not sure if you had anything you wanted to add, but feel free to jump in if you do.
I would just quickly say I agree with Brandon 100%. As somebody who didn't come from a research background at all, I've had the opportunity to work on, I want to say 3 research projects now, and I'm in the process of preparing to work on several more research projects coming up. And ironically, I would have never thought in a million years that it was something I would be interested in doing. And people draw you in, like especially the people that are so passionate about it. They can really draw you in to see where you can be helpful, where you can fit into the process. And yeah, I would just definitely say don't knock it until you try it. And I think you're spot on by saying, you encourage people to try it at least once. And now I'm trying it several times.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add.
Great. Well, thanks. With that, I saw this question come in from our sort of live feed, and I think it's really relevant for this conversation, and that is, what does mentorship look like in a company with a flat structure? This is one that I think about quite a lot, and I think we can get a good mix here of both people who have been mentored and people who are mentors. So Joceline, I'd like to start with you on this one, and then go to Veronica, and then round off with Brandon. And we are going to try and end in about the next 6 minutes or so. So just keep that in mind. If we go over a little bit, no problem.
For sure. Yeah. So mentorship to me was like a huge factor in the reason why I chose Kittelson, I think, over any other firm. For me, I've been pretty lucky to be mentored by lots of people throughout my career, in when I was in college and even now. So Kittleson has a few like more formal structures for mentorship, I think. So when you first start out, you're given basically an onboarding team. So this is 2 people who sort of work with you throughout your first year to make sure that you are good on the basics, on the ins and outs of Kittleson and transportation, right? So these are the people that you expect, that like you can reasonably expect to go to if you ever run into any issues. So they help you like fill your workload, make sure you're getting projects that you're interested in, making sure that you're meeting people with like a variety of career paths so that they can answer your questions and stuff like that. And then I think along the way, you tend to pick up people who kind of serve as your mentors in more informal capacities as well. So, through the employee resource groups, I think I found a lot of peer support and mentorship. And through just even working on lots of projects with certain people, I found mentorship in my project managers. After that kind of onboarding process, you're also encouraged to find 1 or 2 coaches. So these are people anywhere in the firm who have, career paths that you might want to try to emulate, who do projects that you're interested in working on. There's usually a variety of reasons that you choose a coach, and people are pretty intentional in helping you choose who that coach is going to be. So I'm kind of going through that process right now, transitioning from onboarding to coaching as I sort of wrap up my first and some year here. But yeah, I think that even though the structure is flat, I think the flat structure really points to the way that we make decisions on projects. But I think even though you're an entry level employee and you are in the driver's seat of your career, there's plenty of support at Kittleson.
So for me, I came in as, I would say like a mid-level to senior, more towards the senior end level staffer. And so, but I had never been in consulting and I'd never really worked in the private sector. So it was kind of a very weird series of events for me, right? So I needed kind of the perfect storm of mentorship. And so right now I have 3 mentors / coaches that I work with. And it's been extremely helpful. And I feel like people challenge me and push me in different areas. And I was able to kind of, I guess, curate who I thought would push me in the right directions and who would help me seek the type of work that I would need, who would also advocate for me when I felt like maybe I wasn't getting perhaps enough direction or things like that, or help me figure out like next steps in my career, whether it would be growing into different stages of the staff level I'm at or different areas that I would be looking to explore. So I think depending on where you're coming in and how you're coming in, I think you have a lot of opportunity to, 1, learn from the people that when you originally come in that you're assigned to, but 2, you have some say-so into who you're working with, right? Like, you have to learn about them, they have to learn about you, and you have the opportunity to reach out to ask for direction from other people. If you find that you mix well and mesh well with somebody who's a project manager that you report to, I would 1000% say, hey, I like learning from you as I move towards these next phases in my career. Would you be willing to help guide me in some of the directions that I'm interested in going in? And I've done that, and I've done it shamelessly.
Great.
I know we're about at the end of time. I think I'll share, from my perspective, the thing I've benefited the most is just being able to learn from a lot of different individuals. And so I encourage people to build those relationships with others. I don't think you'll find one person who is the end all be all mentor and coach, but I think within everybody, you work with, and especially those you look up to, you can find beneficial things to learn from. So that's my encouragement, is to go out and help seek that, take advantage of whatever the organization offers in terms of that learning, but also take it upon yourself to build relationships and learn from others.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandon. Really great summary, I think, of at least how I feel about mentorship here. It makes it easier in some ways with the flat structure to build more of a network rather than just relying on one person to have all the answers for you.
And kind of one thing I meant to mention, just to tack on, is I think as you grow in your career, we all want that kind of mentorship for others. Well, there's a responsibility to serve and play that role for others, and to keep your door open, to be listening, to be looking for opportunities where you can help others grow.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Well, with that, on that very giving note, I would like to thank our panelists for being so giving of your time and your thoughts, and yeah, just being open with these questions asked. And thank you to our attendees for being giving of your time as well. We really appreciate you joining on, even though we weren't able to get to certainly all of the questions. You all were really great in terms of engagement. So very happy to see that that people were interested in hearing what we had to say. With that, I do believe that there will be a recording of the webinar in case you were having technical difficulties. And as a reminder, we have some later webinars coming up in our series if you would like to join on. So hope to be hearing from you all soon, and thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye. Good night.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.